Welcome to Private Fame. Tonight's story is about Kanye West. Not the fashion icon, not the rap genius, not even Ye, but the man behind the headlines, the outbursts, and the collapse. For years, he shaped the culture. He didn't follow the rules, he rewrote them. But somewhere between the music, the fame, and the noise, something broke. The world once called him a visionary. Then it called him dangerous. His voice, once celebrated, became unpredictable, and his name a battlefield of loyalty, controversy, and confusion. So what does it feel like to be too famous to fail and too human to survive it? To watch your empire turn into a warning sign? Why did it suck to be Kanye West? Because when the world worships your mind, it never asks how your heart is doing. If you're staying with me tonight, like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from and what time your night begins. You're born in the rust-furred winters of Chicago, February 8, 1977, to a mother who teaches you to question everything, and a father whose absence echoes in your childhood like a rest that never quite lands. You grow fast enough to outrun your circumstances, books, art. Dreams saw your armor against a world taught to ignore black brilliance. You're different. You know it. Not just talent, but urgency. The world feels like a canvas you were born to paint on. You know a beat before it's been made. You speak in color and rhythm before you can write and rhyme. You drop out of college but never drop out of ambition. You're not just a rapper. You're a producer, a designer, a self-made aspiration machine. And the labels, they don't know how to handle you. They want a soundbite, a product, a kiddie rapping kid. But you see beyond that, samples as gospel, soul as architecture, beats as cathedral. You hustle with phone calls at 3 a.m., with mailbox mixtapes, with mea culpa bars about your former self. You make friends with legends Common, Jay-Z. Most of fans still, no one can contain this firing mind inside your skull. Through the Wire is the anthem of resilience, not just rap but resurrection. Joel wired shut after the crash. You spit fire anyway, because pain is a verse, heartbeat is a beat, and no stitch can stop your current. You remix pain into gold records. You're the wounded genius, the Chicago kid who made rehabilitation into artistry. And when the college dropout drops, the world tilts. Gospel choir meets animated flows. Food stamps interlaced with Cadillacs. Virgin Records meets human hesitation. Your vulgar sincerity shocks a starved mainstream. Grammy nods follow. Critics nod. Genes can't nod in chairs. But you do. Not humble, intent, thankful, prophetic, even. Then, late registration. Your ambition turns contrarian. You collaborate with John Bryan. You pitch orchestras against hip-hop. You paint mournful self-portraits over dark keys. Politics rise. Race, art, introspection, your record is bigger. Louder, more beautiful. You're a poet, not a rapper. You're charting a course for godlike swagger over your own sound, rewriting pop culture every step. The world watches. But somewhere in the glow of success, the first flicker of fire appears. A backstage moment, an entitlement turned expectation. You're on radio shows, and instead of humility, you speak candidly. I feel like I'm too busy writing history to read it. There's brilliance in that line. Hubris, too. Not arrogance for its own sake, but curiosity that asks, why shouldn't I say this out loud? Who built this ceiling? And in that question is both genius and fracture. You ride the Rockefeller wave as co-president, the only rapper with board-level ambition. Your Wu-Tang impromptu interrupting Taylor Swift at VMAs changes the narrative. What was raw becomes raunch. Support morphs into spectacle. Benevolence gets blurred into humiliation. You're hailed by some, vilified by others, trending across network tickers and late-night monologues. Interruptions become identity. You brand yourself through controversy as often as you brand through beat. Not for clicks, but maybe because saying nothing felt like surrender. That year, 2010, you collapse mid-tour with dehydration, perhaps exhaustion, perhaps a mind bursting at the seams. The world questions whether the genius is burning out. Then you return with new, raw, statementsless glamour, more confrontation, idiosyncrasy bursting through. Closing your album with audio homages, spiritual leanings. Each Kanye iteration is more raw, more fractious, more alive. But now, you cross into politics. Jeffer's name ownership, arcane album covers, Wyoming Ranch, Sunday services singing Christian confirmation, but your public voice in politics draws backlash. You defend Donald Trump. You argue free speech. The world recoils. Brand deals fall away. Fans fracture. 1. Gold charting becomes rare. But you're not here for charts anymore. You're here for narrative. You're here to break, to remake, to shock beauty awake. But as policies hashtag you fragile, your vision dissolves into chaos. The identity you once framed becomes a mask you wear and can't remove. And still you paint. You sketch clothing lines. You draft Sunday sermons. You reimagine existing institutions. You want to lift black voices and deliver spiritual sermons. The ambition remains. But public perception slides. Social media storms. Alt-right choices. Anti-Semitic remarks. You implode. Forbes strips privileges. Twitter, X bans. Touring viability vanishes. Not for performance, but for speech. And the genius that transcended genre now transects it, cutting into dialogue so sharply, it bleeds trust. Your family is crumbling. Kim divorces. Kids' stability fractures along with your image. You're not just Kanye West. You are controversy. You are rumor. You are Capitol riot video cameo. Medical breakdown headlines. Conservatorship whispers. Not the shadow, but the shape of self-destruction sprawling on magazine covers like a caution light. Your vulnerabilities broadcasted like reality TV. Ideological fractures too big for your old frame. Through the darkness, you live for creation. You paint heaven and hell as if making sense of consciousness requires scale. You tweet confessionals, attempt prophetic endorsement. You remix gospel into nihilistic avant-garde. You call yourself Jesus, but your words fracture more than heal. You're unfinished, angry, acting to be both God and mortal at once. And as critics ask, was it ego or awakening? Triumph or lunacy? You keep releasing albums titled Jesus is King, Donda, your mother's name, the house you built in emotional mausoleum. Now you're building not only albums, but YZY houses, Bibles, churches, archives. You're building futures and arguments, but you're watched for self-sabotage. Because each tweet amplifies divide. Each campaign rally echoes something between liberation and distraction. Your 2020 presidential bid felt like grief therapy gone political. You fought, you bled, you lost, you cried, but you didn't leave the stage. Pyramid crisis through image meltdown, you serenade upheaval to bystanders uncomfortably watching your motif collapse under your own intensity. You still hold gigs Donda masses, paying homage to your late mother, but they're also performance masterpieces of grief, lust, tweet transcripts on stage, CPS warnings turned into gospel. Your rise was architected through ambition's genius and pain's confession. Your fall executes public compassion's fracture and sacred collision. And even after you become figure of online memes, Kanye rant videos recreating existential breakdowns, you write music again. You record again. You release again. Not to reclaim the ears of the masses, but to provoke confrontation with yourself and the world that made you. What remains now is this: a man who tried to exist at 3 altitudes at once: musical god, political dissident, spiritual voice. They consumed him. And still you're here. Still you press record. Still you speak prophecy. Still you fuck up, double down, apologize, perform therapy with no edits. You infect the culture, you dismantle it, you damn it, you baptize it. And in every headline, there's still hope that the man who said, "I am a god," might still find the humanity he lost somewhere in the rubble of his own making. You wake up, and the room is quiet, but the internet is screaming. Again, always. Something you said. Something you didn't say fast enough. Something you tweeted in the fevered high of insomnia and adrenaline and divine inspiration and untreated bipolar mania. Your thoughts don't walk, they sprint. Sprint so fast they forget to tie their shoes. Forget where they started. By the time your fingers leave the keyboard, the world has already branded you crazy. Again, genius or lunatic, visionary or villain, messiah or megalomaniac. There's no space between those poles anymore, and you're not even trying to live in that middle ground. You've built your throne on contradiction, and now the cracks are architectural, structural, spiritual. You say slavery was a choice, not because you believe it, not because you don't know the weight of history, but because you're reaching for provocation like it's oxygen. You're addicted to discomfort. Yours, theirs, everyone's. You want to shock people into dialogue, but all you manage is outrage. And in your mind, outrage is proof of impact. Proof you're still relevant. Proof you can still move the needle. But the needle's already in your arm now, and it's pumping poison instead of praise. They don't hear you anymore. They hear static. They see disaster. The MAGA hat isn't a political statement, it's a mirror. You wear it not because you love what it stands for, but because you love how it makes people flinch. You love the power. You're still that kid who wants to break the toy and remake it. But the toy this time is democracy. And the people who believed in you, who danced to your beats at their weddings, who used your lyrics to survive their own depression, you've told them they don't matter. You've traded community for chaos, and the silence is louder than the criticism. Kim leaves, and you pretend it's just another chapter, but she was the last thing anchoring you to the idea of stability. She curated you, softened you, sometimes even translated you, and now you're alone in the castle you built out of pain, wealth, ambition, and unchecked genius. The halls echo. Your children become visitation schedules. Your grief becomes architecture. You rebuild your childhood home inside a stadium and sleep in it like a penance. You host listening parties where you don't speak, just pace like a prophet in a padded room while your mother's name pulses through subwoofers. Donda, always Donda. The mother, the loss, the God wound you never stop bleeding from. You chase resurrection in hi-hats and synth pads and gospel choirs, but the pain never modulates. It just loops. The industry doesn't know what to do with you anymore. You're a liability wrapped in brilliance, a brand no one can predict. Adidas drops you, Gap walks away, Def Jam cuts ties, and the numbers always your fortress begin to falter. Not because the music is bad, but because the myth is breaking. And people are scared now, not of your opinions, of your instability. Your unraveling is no longer theatrical, it's threatening. There's no one left to edit you, no one left to say no. The machine that once polished your legacy is now watching from behind plexiglass, hands folded, afraid you might explode and take everyone with you. And still, you record. Still, you build. Still, you reach. Not for approval, but for proof. That you're alive. That you're not just a cautionary tale. That your mind hasn't eaten you yet. You post screenshots of contracts, of bank statements, of texts from executives. You rage against the system, even though you built your kingdom inside it. You say you're Moses, but you haven't seen the mountain in years. Just smoke. Just mirrors. Just the faint, fading echo of applause from another lifetime. You try to run for president. Again. But the rallies are empty. The cameras don't come. Your speeches are weeping. Uncut monologues. More therapy than policy. People don't vote. They watch. They pity. They meme. You become the content you once weaponized. And the saddest part? You know it. You know they're laughing. You know they're scrolling past your breakdown like it's entertainment. And you don't stop. Because at least they're looking. The man who once said, "You can still be who you really are even after they take everything away," is now testing the limits of that promise. Because they're still taking. And you're still giving. But somewhere along the line, what you're giving stopped being music. It became dissonance. A cry for help masquerading as performance art. And yet somehow, you're still here. Still creating. Still believing. Still insisting that redemption is possible. Not for the world. For yourself. You wake up in warehouses, in bunkers, in stadiums converted into temples for grief. You live among prototypes and half-finished shoes, notebooks scrawled with grand declarations. Wheezy is not fashion. It is salvation, and every sentence ends like a sermon, like the blueprint for a church only you can build. You've exiled yourself from the Hollywood Hills, fled the sterile comfort of Calabasas, and now you haunt these brutalist cathedrals like a mad monk with a Wi-Fi password. You speak to no one. You speak to everyone. You livestream prayers into voids. You tweet. You delete. You reappear, swollen with new proclamations, always on the edge of revelation or rupture. They call it a breakdown. You call it becoming. There are no more handlers, no more stylists, no more publicists tugging at your elbow whispering, "Maybe don't say that. You've burned the bridges. Now you stand at the end of your own causeway. Fire behind you, fog ahead. You are alone. And you are exactly where you think you need to be. Because alone means unfiltered. Alone means free. But freedom without friction becomes echo. And echo, after a while, stops sounding like your voice and starts sounding like madness. Your albums get stranger, more skeletal, less music than meditation. You hum fragments of ideas over minimalist drones and call it genius. And maybe it is, or maybe it's just pain, unstructured. The grief of a man who lost his mother, his marriage, his mind, and now mistakes purity for incoherence. The critics don't know what to say anymore. They used to parse your lyrics like scripture. Now they avoid the subject entirely. Too dangerous. Too sad. Too real. And then the anti-Semitism, the final line crossed. You tweet things so violent, so naked in hate and delusion, that even your most loyal followers pause. You praise Hitler. You descend into conspiracy. You mock Jewish pain like it's performance art. What once was misunderstood is now inexcusable. Adidas drops you, publicly. Forbes removes you from the billionaire list. Your contracts evaporate in legal heat. Balenciaga shutters your campaigns. Banks refuse your business. You are no longer problematic. You are radioactive. You claim cancel culture. You claim martyrdom. You say, this is what genius looks like. But genius isn't cruelty. And even those who once called you a prophet now look away. There's no metaphor for this. Just harm. Just loss. Just the sound of doors slamming shut on a man who once opened them with his bare hands and a beat. You try to rebrand. You release statements. You vanish for weeks at a time. You emerge with new women, new headlines, new plans. But they all reek of desperation now. They smell like smoke. You've burned through grace, through patience, through benefit of the doubt. And the world, no matter how complicit it once was in your rise, no longer offers you the same stage. You've become your own stage, and it's empty. Just lights, just echoes, just you, preaching into the abyss about fashion, faith, betrayal, brilliance. You think you're building the future, but what you're really building is a monument to your own exile. There are moments still when the old you glimmers through, when you speak of Donda and your voice cracks, when your children are near and you soften, when the camera isn't on and the mask slips. But those moments are rarer now, buried beneath layers of armor and paranoia and ideology. You have become myth and mirror and menace, and no one or not even you knows where the real Kanye is anymore. Maybe he's gone, or maybe he's just buried under everything you thought you had to become to be heard, to be right, to be God. ChatGPT said, you used to call yourself a god, but now even you don't believe it. Not really. Not when the voices won't quiet, not when the empire's hollow. Not when the applause stopped meaning anything, and the silence feels like judgment. You pace your minimalist compound like a prophet without a prophecy, designing shoes no one's buying and preaching sermons no one's quoting. You wear masks in public, not metaphorical ones anymore, but actual, stitched leather veils over your faces if anonymity might reverse the damage. As if erasing your face might erase what you've said. But the world remembers, and worse, it's moved on. The music still comes, but it no longer arrives in explosions. It leaks. It meanders. Sometimes you forget to finish a track. Sometimes the track was never the point. You float snippets online, unfinished, fragile. You call them demos, but they sound like confessions. Auto-tuned heartbreak over ambient loops. No hooks, no bars, just noise and breathing. You once sculpted culture with bass lines. Now you whisper into Pro Tools and hope someone still cares. And there are still people who care. That's the twisted part. They still watch, they still listen, but it's no longer admiration. It's voyeurism. You've become content. Not an artist, not even a man, just a feed. A spectacle. A series of alerts and think pieces. Every sentence you utter spawns 3 reactions, a podcast episode, and a subreddit debate. You want it to be heard, but this isn't hearing. It's surveillance. You speak about the system, about control, about the industry. You say you were exploited, that your publishing deals were predatory, that your likeness is owned by corporations who never cared about your soul. And you're not wrong, but you're too late. The fight is over, and you already signed the papers. You already sold the image. They gave you billions, and in return, they took your reflection. You see your face in places you don't remember approving. You hear your voice remixed into commercials for things you hate. Your catalog is immortal, you, less so. You try to build again. Sunday services, Yeezy campuses, new schools that shut down mid-semester with unpaid teachers and locked doors. You call it visionary. They call it grift. You call it the future. They call it dangerous. You want to educate the youth, give them fashion, theology, technology, but you've forgotten how to finish things. Everything is a sketch. Every promise is a teaser. There's no follow-through, only the trailer for a documentary that will never air. And then there's the isolation, the phone calls that stop coming, the collaborators who quietly remove you from credits, the silence from old friends, from Jay, from Beyonce, from Chance. You say they betrayed you. Maybe they did. Maybe they just couldn't watch anymore. Maybe they decided that genius isn't enough when it burns everyone around you. You used to bring people together. Now you push them away before they can leave. Kim doesn't talk to you directly. Communication goes through assistants, lawyers, nannies. You post about your children. You beg to see them more. You post their school locations, their schedules, your grievances. It reads like desperation. It is desperation. The family you once flexed like status is now an artifact, something you lost, not through fate, but through a series of very public, very cruel detonations. And underneath all the sound and fury, the truth is so small, it's almost pitiful. You miss her. You miss them. You miss the version of yourself who wasn't afraid to sit still, who could love without performance, who didn't have to win every argument by losing the room. You still have money. That was never the issue. But it doesn't insulate anymore. It isolates. You wear designer boots that reach your thighs, and no one tells you they look ridiculous. You post screenshots of bank transfers like proof of life. You record yourself raving on Instagram Live while your eyes dart around like you're expecting ghosts. You speak in riddles. You beg for God to answer you. You demand the world repent, but the world doesn't answer, and neither does God. Just static. Just you. Just a man who climbed to heaven, declared himself divine, and then realized too late that the fall doesn't come with a parachute. There are no charts now. No rollout strategies. No marketing team scrambling to prep the next drop. You drop things when you want, and half the time you pull them back down 5 minutes later. You're not making albums anymore. You're issuing proclamations, audio manifestos soaked in feedback and ghosted drums. The mixing is off. The features are uncredited. The lyrics are fractured. You don't care. You don't finish songs because you don't believe in endings anymore. Endings are for other people. You're still writing, still talking, still uploading, still bleeding in real time. You used to fill arenas. Now you fill group chats. Your name trends not because of what you made, but because of what you broke again. A brand, a contract, a friendship, a taboo. You don't just cross lines. You obliterate them. And in the crater left behind, you don't plant a flag. You just keep walking, as if nothing happened. As if the world owes you not just forgiveness, but understanding. Because you understand, that's the delusion. The curse of intelligence. Believing that if you see it clearly, everyone else will too. But they don't. They can't. And maybe they won't. Ever again. The fashion industry has stopped returning your calls. Not because you're not a genius, but because you're no longer predictable. You used to dictate trends. Now, they dictate distance. You were the man who made ugly sneakers high fashion, who turned beige into gospel, who could wear a sock and make it couture. But now you show up in rags, in heavy boots, in full-face masks, like a fugitive from your own legacy. You call it design. They call it decline. Even your fans are tired. Not the diehards. Not the ones who tattooed your lyrics on their ribs, but the rest. The casuals, the hopefuls, the ones who wanted to believe you were just going through something. They stuck around through Ye, through Jesus is King, through the presidential rally, through the anti-Semitic rants, through the meltdowns and walkouts and midnight live streams. But even they have limits, and you found them. You don't tour. You don't speak on panels. You don't show up to awards shows. You don't need to. You've made yourself uninvitable. And the freedom you always said you wanted, that total lack of oversight, of edit, of compromise, it's here. But it's cold and lonely. And the echo chamber doesn't applaud. It just reverberates. Sometimes you show up in public. TMZ photos. Awkward angles. Always wrapped in black. You walk fast, as if outrunning yourself. People shout your name. Some still ask for selfies. But there's a new look in their eyes, something between nostalgia and worry. You're not their hero anymore. You're their lesson. Their uncle at Thanksgiving they don't bring up around guests. The guy who used to be Kanye. But you're still him. Somewhere inside. You're still the kid from Chicago who chopped soul samples until they bled beauty. Who made his pain into poetry and dared the world to look away. You still feel like you're on the verge of something big in last album. One last reinvention. One final act to silence all the doubters. That's the flame that won't die. The belief that it's not over. That it can't be. Because you're too brilliant. Because there's still a version of you they'll love again. If you just get it right. But every day, it slips further. The line between reinvention and self-destruction. Between art and apology. Between Kanye West and the man you used to be. And one day, maybe not soon, but soon enough, the uploads will stop. The headlines will slow. The fire will go out. Not because it wasn't real, but because even fire runs out of fuel. And all that will be left is the silence. A silence that doesn't forgive. Doesn't forget. Just waits. You sit in silence now. More often than not. Not because you've run out of things to say, but because the noise you unleashed has finally drowned out your own voice. You watch the culture you helped shape move on without you, faster, louder, younger, more sanitized. You were never meant to age inside the machine. You were designed to break it. And now that it's rebuilt without you, you don't recognize the landscape anymore. The beats are thinner. The lyrics safer. The brand's shinier. Everyone plays nice, stays on script, runs their PR like scripture. You made vulnerability dangerous. They made it marketable. You're no longer the blueprint. You're the warning label. People reference you the way they reference Greek mythology. They say ye, the way they say Icarus, a name tied to flight and flame. You soared too high. You didn't just challenge gods. You tried to become one. And the world, briefly, believed you. That was the power. You had us convinced that you could reshape reality with a 16-bar verse and a pair of high tops. You had us singing along while you disintegrated. We bought tickets to the fire. We wore the merch. We built shrines out of vinyl sleeves and genius annotations. And now, you're still here. A man in exile, broadcasting sermons into the void, hoping the right frequency will make the walls answer back. You haven't stopped working. You never could. Work is the only thing that kept the noise at bay. You sketch shoes that no one funds. You record vocals into phones, upload them to nowhere. You make beats like prayers, rhythms like rituals, hoping that somewhere out there, someone's still listening. That maybe, just maybe, there's a road back. But the bridges are ash. Your family is gone. Your fans are fractured. Your partners are silent. And all the fire you once summoned now just smolders at your feet. Not warm enough to keep the loneliness out. Not bright enough to light the way forward. You talk to God a lot. More than you used to. Not in press clips or church services, but quietly. Desperately. You ask him why the gift came with this much pain. Why the vision had to be so lonely. You ask for answers. Or at least peace. You ask if your mother can still hear you. You ask if your children will understand. You ask if the next thing you make will matter. You ask if you'll ever be loved without needing to provoke it. There are no answers. Not yet. Just the beat. Always the beat. It's Keter now, but it's still yours. You don't go out much anymore. When you do, it's like a glitch in the algorithm blurry photo, a muffled audio clip, a tabloid headline crafted from 6 seconds of eye contact and silence. You've become a myth filtered through paparazzi lenses. They say you're hiding. Maybe you are. Or maybe the version of you that once demanded the world look is just tired. Tired of explaining. Tired of apologizing. Tired of asking to be seen and only being consumed. You live in minimalist compounds now. Places that feel like museums or prisons, depending on the day. Long hallways. No furniture. Just echo. Every room a cathedral for a thought that never got built. Your notebooks are full of sketches of architecture. Of concepts. Of equations that don't solve anything but look profound. You write words over and over. Donda. Yea. Truth. Forgiveness. God. And somewhere in that tangle is a man who once changed the world with a sped-up Chaka Khan sample. You replay your old songs sometimes. Not in public. Alone. Late at night. You listen to Hey Mama and try not to cry. You listen to Ultralight Beam and try to believe it. You listen to Power and wonder if you still have any. You listen to Runaway, and that one hurts the most. Because you meant it. You really did. You really were trying to warn them. To warn her. To warn yourself. You scroll social media like a ghost haunting his own timeline. You see young artists using your cadences. See designers mimicking your old silhouettes. See pastors sampling your Sunday service videos. You see your fingerprints everywhere, and none of it has your name on it anymore. You weren't just replaced. You were absorbed. Your influence is now aesthetic, sanitized, monetized, stripped of all the chaos that made it human. And what does that leave you? Legacy? Sure. Influence? Undeniable. But relevance? Humanity? Forgiveness? That part's unclear. People don't talk about your music anymore. Not really. Not the way they used to. Not the way they do about Kendrick, or Frank, or even Drake. You're a case study now, a thread on Reddit, a remember when. Your albums are on playlists, but they're not moments anymore. They're echoes, and that burns in a way nothing else does. Because more than fame, more than money, more than even being right, you want it to matter. You want it to last, and maybe you still will. Maybe in 50 years, someone will dig through your vault and hear something pure, something undistorted, some fragment of Ye untouched by the noise. And maybe they'll feel it. Maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll say, he was trying. And they'd be right. You were. Even when you failed. Especially when you failed. You were always trying to build something bigger than yourself. You just didn't realize it would bury you. You don't announce your return. There's no rollout, no surprise drop, no headline-grabbing tweet. You just appear again, like static breaking into a dead channel. One day it's a leaked snippet. A scratchy voice note, with a hook that sounds like it's begging for redemption. Then it's footage of you in the studio unshaven, wild-eyed, eyes flickering like there's a war going on behind them that no one else can see. Your posture is tighter now, as if your body remembers what your mind is still refusing to accept, that the comeback will never look like it did the first time. The throne isn't empty anymore. The game moved on without you. And you, once the architect, are now the ghost in your own cathedral. Still, you build. You always build. Not because you believe the world deserves it, but because it's the only way you know how to survive yourself. So you gather sounds like broken glass. You sample whispers instead of choirs. You lay down verses that don't rhyme, don't finish, don't resolve. You talk about pain without naming it. You mention your children without their names. You talk about God like he's a business partner who stopped answering emails. The music isn't a return. It's a residue. The sound of a man recording because silence feels too much like death. And for a second, just a second, the world looks again. The blogs light up. Reddit threads multiply. Fans, cautiously optimistic, wonder if this is the one. If this will be the album that rewrites the ending, that proves you were always ahead, not lost. But the momentum never lasts. The moment passes. The album drops quietly. No billboard. No listening party. No Yeezy-infused circus. It's not a revolution. It's a confession. And that's not what they want from you anymore. They wanted fireworks. You gave them ashes, and they don't know how to celebrate that. The reviews are mixed. Some call it brave, others call it incoherent. A few say it's your most honest work in years. Most say nothing at all. Silence becomes the loudest feedback of all. You were once the volume knob for the culture. Now you're background noise in a playlist they forget to turn off. You retreat. Not because you're defeated, but because you're finally exhausted. You stop tweeting. You shut the doors. You start showing up to therapy. Not the performative kind. Not interviews framed as vulnerability. Actual silence. Actual shame. Actual reckoning. You sit with the things you said. With the people you hurt. With the empire you lit on fire because it wouldn't obey you anymore. You don't look for forgiveness. You look for understanding. And that's the difference. You're not building for applause now. You're building for clarity. You start calling old friends. Not collaborators. Not producers. People. Human beings. The ones who were there before the God complex. Before the flames, before the MAGA hats and the masks and the monologues. Some pick up, some don't. Some just listen. But for the first time in a long time, you don't demand to be understood. You just tell them the truth. I was scared. I didn't know how to stop. I thought if I made enough noise, I wouldn't feel small. It's not redemption, but it's real. And real is what you lost when you became the brand. You start going to church again. Not yours, not Sunday service, not the choir wrapped in Balenciaga robes. A regular church, with bad coffee and broken pews. No one takes selfies. No one quotes your lyrics. You sit in the back and listen to people sing songs you didn't write. It feels strange. It feels beautiful. It feels like the beginning of something that doesn't need a hashtag. And maybe, just maybe, this is what resurrection looks like. Not a comeback, not a campaign. Just a man sitting still for the first time in 20 years. ChatGPT said, "You stop trying to control the narrative." That's the strangest freedom of all. You've lived your entire life as a director screaming into a projector booth, insisting the world watch your movie the way you see it. And now you sit in the theater like everyone else, just watching. People still talk. They dissect your past like a crime scene. Cut your discography into eras like autopsy reports. They ask what happened to you. Some blame the fame. Others blame the illness. The most devout say it was the devil. The cruelest say it was always inevitable. You don't correct them. You don't argue anymore. You just breathe. You used to equate silence with erasure. If you weren't speaking, you weren't living. If you weren't making noise, you didn't exist. But now you find a strange solace in being invisible. You go days without checking the trending tab. You stop Googling your own name. You stop comparing yourself to what you used to be. You start asking questions you once thought were beneath you. What does peace look like if no one's watching? What does art mean if no one buys it? Who am I if I'm not being quoted? You walk more. Alone. No entourage. No cameras. You go places where people don't care about your catalog. A bus stop in Idaho. A grocery store in Montana. You hear people laugh and none of them are laughing at you. It feels foreign. It feels like oxygen. There's no big reveal. No final album. No death-defying press tour. The culture doesn't hand you a trophy and say, "Welcome back." It doesn't work that way. This isn't a comeback story. This is something else. Something smaller. Something more honest. You help someone carry their groceries. You read to your kids. You show up to a PTA meeting. No one knows it's you until you speak. And when they recognize your voice, they don't scream. They don't cry. They just look at you like a person, not a prophet, not a cautionary tale, just a man. And that look, it breaks something in you, in a good way. For the first time in years, you're not performing. You're not branding. You're not burning down bridges just to feel the warmth. You're just here. You still have ideas. Always. Some wild, some beautiful, some terrifying. But now you write them down instead of broadcasting them. You let them marinate. You stop mistaking every impulse for destiny. You give them time. And in that time, something new starts to form, not a project, not a plan, just a possibility. You might make another album. You might not. You might design another shoe. You might just plant a garden. And for the first time in your life, either option feels like enough. Because the rise was never sustainable. And the fall wasn't the end. It was the door. The one you always knew existed. The one you were too busy yelling to see. You've stopped counting time in days or years. Now it's measured in moments. The first time you hear your daughter sing and she hits a note that reminds you of your mother. The first time a stranger holds the door open and doesn't mention your name. The first time you sleep through the night and don't wake up mid-dream with a line in your head you have to write down. You're not healed. That would imply there's no more hurt. No, the hurt is still there. It just doesn't scream anymore. It hums. A background noise. Like the hiss of a record after the music ends. You live differently now. You dress quieter. Not because you've lost your sense of style, but because you've stopped needing to be seen. The layers are still there. Your mind still runs, still builds, but you're no longer burning the world just to feel lit. You don't need everyone to know what you're working on. You don't need the world to call it genius. You just want to make something honest. Something your kids won't be embarrassed to find when they're old enough to Google you on their own. You see a therapist. Weekly. It's not glamorous. It's not Instagrammable. But it's work. The hardest work you've ever done. Some sessions you don't speak. Some you can't stop. But everyone chips away at the old script. The one that told you pain equals power. That rage equals relevance. That being loud was the same as being right. You don't always believe in yourself. Not like before. But you've started to believe in possibility again. That maybe you can be something other than the sum of your meltdowns. That maybe your kids will grow up knowing you not just as the headline, but as the hand that reached for them. As the man who tried, and failed, and tried again. You keep a piano in the corner of your kitchen. Sometimes you sit down and play a chord so beautiful it makes your throat ache. You don't record it. You don't post it. You just let it exist. You let the silence afterwards speak louder than applause ever could. One night, a friend from the old days comes by. They bring takeout. You don't talk about the past. Not much. Just the weather. Your kids. Some song you both used to love. You laugh. Real laughter. The kind that doesn't sound like armor. They leave. And for a second, you sit in the doorway, looking at the streetlight shadows on the floor, and you realize something. You're still here. Not everyone gets that chance. You still have breath. You still have time. You still have a shot at being more than the worst thing you've done. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Not to rebuild the empire, but to rebuild the man. There will be retrospectives. Of course there will. Netflix specials, unauthorized biopics, think pieces titled The Complicated Genius of Kanye West, written by people who never met you but who will try, paragraph by paragraph, to balance your brilliance against your collapse. They'll talk about the college dropout like it was scripture. About my beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy like it was a hallucinated confession. About ye like it was a cry for help we all ignored. They'll debate whether your fall was inevitable, whether the industry broke you or you broke yourself. They'll say your name like it's a cipher. They'll speak of you in past tense, even while you're still breathing. They will reduce you to a meme, amistake, but you will not be there to correct them. Because the truth is, you were never meant to be understood. You were meant to be felt. And feeling, as it turns out, is dangerous. It's unstable. It doesn't fit into categories or award shows. It doesn't get clean endings. It doesn't resolve like a hook or a headline. It lingers. It hurts. It transforms. And that's what you gave them. You didn't just change music. You changed how pain could sound. You gave grief a beat. You made confession into performance. You turned joy into spectacle and trauma into gospel. And for that, they loved you. Until they didn't. But some of us we remember. Not the chaos, not the controversy, not the collapse. We remember the voice. The one that cracked just a little on family business? The one that laughed through its own anger on Touch the Sky? The one that screamed, "Don't leave while I'm here," and meant every word? You were never our role model. You were our mirror. Flawed, messy, contradictory, wholly in the way only broken things can be. And now you live in fragments. In the bridge of a song that plays at a stranger's wedding, in the silhouette of a sneaker that became a symbol, in the silence after the beat drops. You're not a god. You're not a villain. You're not even Kanye West anymore. You're just a story, one that keeps getting told, even after the music stops.